Hey everyone, thank you for joining our session today. My name is Jim Brisimitzis. I'm one of the founders here at the 5G Open Innovation Lab in Seattle. We appreciate you all taking some time to be with us. I'm joined by Kevin Ober, who is a general partner that we're partnering with on our rolling fund, which you'll hear a lot about today. And then we've also invited four of our teams to the call as well. We'd like to give you all a perspective in terms of the new innovation that we're seeing here through the lab, with a sampling of some of the teams that we've had. If you haven't heard about the Innovation Lab before, it's a program that we started in 2020. We've had 4 batches come through the program since then, 59 teams, and we'll go into some of the details of the technology and the partnerships that we've been able to build here in this program. But with that, we wanted to kick off first with, really what's this thesis, right? There's a lot of really good chatter in the market about 5G and edge, and a lot of marketing about it as well. When we look at the opportunity space in 5G, really it's a combination of many things, but at the core of it all is data. And data has been exponentially growing since the early 2000s. And if you look at this first chart here, in 2010, according to statistics that I've looked at, there was about 2 zettabytes worth of data in the world today, at that point in time, not today. And the zettabyte, just as a reference, is a trillion gigabytes. In 2020, that actually ballooned from 2 zettabytes to 64 zettabytes. And if you fast forward to 2025, speculation is that it's somewhere between 164 zettabytes to 185 zettabytes, depending on what source of data you look at. What's core about that data is that that data needs to be connected, that data needs to be processed, and that data needs to move back and forth to users. And 5G networks and edge networks and cloud computing, along with a very robust application ecosystem, is really where the investment opportunity is. And the whole reason why we stood up the 5G Open Innovation Lab. Now, if you look at the potential impact of data to GDP growth and to potential global economies around the world, there was some really interesting work done by PwC Consulting, some papers that I had read in the past, but $15.7 trillion of potential contribution to GDPs globally, 26% boost in GDPs as well. So data is really the new oil. And I was on stage yesterday with our partner, Caroline Chan from Intel, along with Eric Weaver from Transparent Path. And we had talked about this opportunity space in 5G. Now, while 5G is a critical enabler, it's not necessarily the destination. Its destination from an investment perspective is really around companies that are creating services and products and underlining infrastructure that's going to make the collection of data, the processing and transmission of that data fast and effective. The 5G Open Innovation Lab was really focused on those areas. Now, when you look at historical contexts, there's 2 areas that I like to spend my time contemplating and thinking about. The first is around the 4 waves of industrial revolution, from the first wave of Industry 1.0, focused on mechanization, right through to Industry 4.0, which is the cyber physical systems, which is really a collection of virtual and augmented reality, cloud and edge computing, and IoT coming together that's going to fundamentally transform how industries operate in the future. And the finest point of that we've seen as of recent is the impacts that COVID has had around the world, and that impact on industries, whether it's now in supply chain shortages to simple things like workers not being able to enter into manufacturing facilities, as an example. IDC calls this market opportunity a $6.8 trillion opportunity in the next 3 years. So as an investor looking into this problem space, the industrial revolutions have really been big markers in the economy that have driven huge amounts of wealth creation. And in this case, Industry 4.0 is probably one of the biggest. Now, if you parlay that to the 5 generations of wireless standards, from 1G to 2G, 3G, 4G to 5G, you'll see that in the context of 5G, there's a significantly bigger move away from mobile broadband to ultra low latency communications, IoT, and machine to machine. There's a correlation at play between where 5G network architecture is going, how that gets parlayed into edge networking, and how that's going to be driven by the demand we're going to see in this 4th wave industrial revolutions. And that is exciting for us. And that's exactly the thesis that we have here at the 5G Open Innovation Lab. And the reason why we've been fortunate enough to work with the partners that we have and work with the founders that we have that are entirely focused on the enterprise. So just to kind of summarize this, when we look at the value chain, we think the 5G value chain is really being transformative from a cellular and an ability to connect things, both in the context of private 5G networks and enterprises, which we're starting to see some building momentum on, and also in the public 5G world as well. And our partner T-Mobile is really leading the charge on a lot of that. Then we see the emergence of edge computing. I was just reading the other day, and Anand can speak to this as well. It's his world, better, more than my world. But the average car today is generating about 300 terabytes worth of data a year. A lot of that data doesn't need to be moved to a public cloud instance for processing. A lot of that data is being processed on vehicles, and a lot of that data could eventually be processed on the edge. And so the edge computing world is going to play a fundamentally big role in computing long-term, and will have an impact in how developers are creating applications to take advantage of strong connectivity and processing nearby. Now, the public cloud space is not going to go anytime soon. In fact, it's continuing to grow and evolve. And some of those bigger, heavy data workloads will continue to reside there, as will all of the applications. And so from a context of 5G, the biggest opportunities really is in the enterprise world. And whether you look at IDC data or Gartner data that suggests next year that IT spending could actually break through $4 trillion a year, there's something fundamental as an investment opportunity that we're really looking at. And from a lab perspective, we've really had this chance to really coalesce a lot of the partnerships and the startups, as well as a lot of the external enterprises that we've worked with to really see a very clear view of this. And so with that, I'd like to stop talking here and actually invite our first startup, Kevin Bandy from Simetric, to share a little bit of what he's doing. We're going to hear from Kevin, we'll hear from Chris at Metrolla, then we'll hear from Anand at Halocar, and we'll hear from Amar at Aarna Networks. These are 4 startups of the 59 that we've had a chance to work with that gives you perspective in the types of innovations that they're pursuing that are important capabilities that we believe are going to have a market impact in the future. And these are examples of deals that we would be able to invest in as well through the rolling fund. Once we've gone through that, my partner Kevin Ober will come up and talk a little bit about the fund mechanics itself, and then we will open it up for some Q&A. And so with that.
Thank you, Jim. Hello, my name is Kevin Bandy. I'm the president of Simetric. And one of the things that Jim highlighted there is that you see a significant shift in technologies. And as Jim knows, I used to be a part of Chuck Robbins' leadership team at Cisco. And in the early days, John Chambers and I would sit and discuss what he called the Internet of Everything, not the Internet of Things. And it in large part references to what Jim was showing you, is that there is, for the very first time, not a technological shift around moving from 2G to 3G to 4G, but there's decisive technology trends, 5G, SD-WAN, AI, all moving in parallel, that are going to have a material impact upon every single company. We were fortunate enough to be a participant in batch 3. And in the last year and a half, you're seeing, since we introduced Simetric, companies not only from the enterprise side pursuing us, but also technological partnerships that are looking to extend their own technology strategies, but also the MNOs, the MVNOs, and partners. Because for the very first time, there is a shift across many technologies that are going to impact business models. We've talked about digitization for a long time, but what Jim talks about, $3, $4, $5 trillion, those aren't just technology investments, they're fundamental business shifts. And this is just a very quick reflection of companies that have pursued that evolution of how they're going to migrate towards the edge. Why they're coming in this particular phase is a lot of companies have talked about IoT, but they've looked at it as a static state. If I go back to John's point of view, it was in the first phase, it was all about automation. Whereas if you look towards the progression of 5G, for the very first time, you're going to have compute, security, and connectivity running on every single device. And why that's a material evolution is because no longer is it automation, it's business process automation that will be run at the edge. And that has a material impact upon how you run a business collectively. And so when you look at the value of Simetric, there's a great deal of complexity across proprietary networks, but also disparity between the network and the application layer. And you also have proprietary nature of the carriers. Simetric is the first holistic IoT lifecycle management solution that has normalized all the discrepancies across all the major carriers to unify visibility, not only of all edge devices, but also how those devices are consuming connectivity to control your migration. If you look at it, we are very global. But the reason why I call that out is we're as ubiquitous as public cloud, because when a customer stands us up, they go global in their footprint and control. Instead of swiveling across many different carriers to manage their edge devices, they have a unified single pane of glass to control not only all edge devices, but also all activities that they deploy across the devices, across every single carrier. Instead of being beholden to 220 carriers, you're controlled and executing within one pane of glass. So when you think about that from an opportunity perspective and why we're looking at this, it goes back to what Jim was saying. There is a progression, there is a migration, but the legacy complexity, companies have historically followed technology companies and they've refreshed. It's no longer about refreshing technology because 5G, SD-WAN, and these other strategies that are all coalescing will require companies to navigate how they run their businesses at the edge, and it will impact every single company. Legacy devices that are 2G will have to be upgraded 3G. You'll see carriers retire CDMA networks. All has to be managed. If you look at that today in 2020, that was valued at a $250 billion market segment. Of those 30 billion devices, Jim said it, that market segment has accelerated greatly, and we're still trying to assess just how much it has accelerated as work has been dispersed with COVID. But if you look at that addressable base, where Simetric today has over 3 billion devices that are stuck, that have to migrate, that have no industry standard, in the next 2 years, we'll have an addressable base of over 7 billion devices to help those enterprises and partners navigate their edge strategies. And one of the things that's very unique is you see on the right-hand side, we've largely pertained just towards proving the market that there's a trapped install base of opportunity. But across the left-hand side, what you see us rolling out in 2021 and 2022 is mobile network operators, the hyperscalers, and even the OEMs and the system integrators are all coming to us because you cannot progress to the vision that Jim articulated at the beginning of 5G without navigating and controlling the migration of the entirety of your install base. Not a bifurcated view, but the entirety of it. So for the very first time, you're seeing Simetric not only discover all of the install base, but being able to control the migration and the monetization and the value as it evolves. You know, just a quick view is, you can tell I'm not a young person. Retiring out of Silicon Valley, I bring a very unique perspective. The rest of our management team comes from Microsoft, from IBM, and many other large industry companies where we're unifying our vision around what others have missed. We're tapping into a multi-billion-dollar segment, but in just 1 year's time, where we show ARR ending at 3 to 5 million in 1 year, it's going to be largely closer to 7 million by the end of December. And so our pipeline has grown exponentially because the enterprises aren't looking for a refresh. They're looking for a migratory strategy to take advantage of edge networking. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Kevin. I appreciate that. Next up, we'd like to introduce Chris Judd from Metrolla. Chris?
Hi there. I'm going to share my screen. I assume you can see it?
We can.
Great. Thank you for having me. And that was a really good presentation that we just listened to. And it's interesting being in the 5G Open Innovation Lab because there's a variety of participants, and some of them are much further along and some of them are very early. We started just about a year and a half ago, and I'm just going to take you through and share our vision around doing edge analytics. And let's see if I can make this go forward. So what we are focused on is what's called real life autonomous applications of LiDAR technologies. And specifically, for those of you that aren't familiar with LiDAR, but probably most are, LiDAR uses laser to provide distance and recognize objects. And it sort of is a next generation beyond video. And often you connect both video and LiDAR into the application. And so I'm going to just take you through what that means. I will say we started off in the autonomous vehicle space, and we very early on pivoted to what we'll call smart infrastructure. Originally, we were calling it smart cities, but smart infrastructure is really our focus, and things like traffic management and security, and I'll just take you through that. Basically, the company was founded by Adam. He's our CTO, and he's listed as a co-founder, but he's the brains behind the company. I'm the business person, and Lexi is our CMO and co-founder, and now we've made her our COO. Smart sensors are really where we're focused, but again, we're focused on LiDAR. And what we found early on was there was not an easy way to access data. There was a long time to market. It was very difficult to apply machine learning, and it was difficult to interconnect the sensors and the data, across a network. And the basis of our hang on one second, I got to clear something out of the way. The basis of our solution is we typically will have a LiDAR unit. This is an Ouster rotational LiDAR head that has a number of lasers that rotate, and then we connect it to an edge device. We have a 5G connection that goes back to a server, which could be on bare metal, or it could be in a hosted environment, like on AWS or Azure. We're cloud independent. We take that information and we will take it and do machine learning on it and edge analytics. I will do analytics like annotation and object recognition, and then we'll push that back out to the edge. What we learned very early on was that there's so much data created by LiDAR, and it's just as Jim was talking about, the amount of data is just growing exponentially, but LiDAR by itself can generate terabytes of data per day as it's picking up these point clouds. And so what we really figured out we had to do was move the analytics to the edge and make the edge intelligent and able to recognize objects, and then only really send back the meaningful metadata that you need to act on back in the cloud. Today, we have a number of pilots we're working on. We have one in the city of Austin, road worker safety. We have one in Georgia, traffic management, has to do with on-ramps and wrong way speed detection. We have an application around security for rural fiber hubs that has to do with the infrastructure bill. We have a drone delivery, package delivery pilot that we're working on to basically create essentially crosswalks in the sky to allow drones to get over freeways and busy intersections, and have a way to know that like the freeway doesn't have traffic below them when they cross. So number of pilots, and really when we look at our industry, we've got smart infrastructure, road safety and traffic management, security, and then we also have that with infrastructure and with defense. And although we started our product in the self-driving autonomous cars, what we quickly realized working with a couple of LiDAR companies was the near-term market had a lot more to do with what was being called smart cities, and a segment within smart cities is smart infrastructure, and that's really where we're focused today. We have a number of partners. Ouster is our primary partner today in the LiDAR space, also Velodyne, Luminar, Hesai. So these are all top LiDAR providers. And then other companies like OnLogic, Anatel, Supervisely. Anatel and Supervisely are interesting partners because they, like Supervisely has created the ability to use AI to do LiDAR object recognition and tag the objects. And that is a big sticking point when you're working with LiDAR. You have to be able to recognize objects and you have to be able to train the models. And we've put together a system where we can actually send the data almost like a CI/CD pipeline to a company and very quickly get the data annotated, and then we update the model, and then we push it back to the edge. So we can actually update the edge analytics on the fly while in production. The way we do our business model, it has to do with annual licensing, metered billing, subscription. We're working both on channel-related resellers and direct sales, and we have a strategy around implementation. We've done a friends and family round. We're just started on a pre-seed round. We have a number of pilots in multiple sectors, and really part of what we're doing, we filed patents on that have to do with heavy data transmission, and then we were really happy to be able to get into the 5G Open Innovation Lab, because 5G is really the right solution as we have found to be able to get to the edge and do those analytics and pass the data back. We also are in the Qualcomm Smart City Accelerator and a number of other programs. And that is really my presentation. And I'll just stop my screen sharing, and I appreciate everyone listening to that.
Thank you, Chris. We appreciate it as well. I love to ask a few questions actually when we wrap up the session today. So with that, I'd like to actually move it over to Amar from Aarna Networks.
Hi, everyone. I think I need permission to start my video.
We can see your slides.
Your slides are up, Amar.
Okay,
And
I'll get going. Yeah, I'm not able to start my video, but that's okay. So hi, everyone. This is Amar Kapadia. I'm co-founder and CEO at Aarna Networks. We were in the first cohort at the 5G Open Innovation Lab, and we have benefited tremendously as a first cohort company, and continuously since then. So delighted to be here. Our promise to our enterprise customers is zero-touch management for 5G and edge computing applications, and we are delivering that promise as a service. So essentially, we are approaching 5G and edge computing from the management plane point of view. So if you are at this forum, I really don't have to talk much about this slide. You're probably already up to speed on 5G and edge computing and how they correlate. But just to make a quick point, we are not going after B2C. So that's the little phone on the left with the X sign. And instead, we are focusing on B2B and verticals such as Industry 4.0, where 5G is supposed to increase productivity by 20 to 30%, precision agriculture. You probably heard about all the water savings and efficiencies. Healthcare, where 5G is expected to generate $305 billion in savings every year. So the promise is massive. And our assessment is that all of these really need edge computing applications to deliver the value. And 5G is the ideal network to connect end devices to edge computing applications. And the numbers, again, I'm not going to belabor the point, very, very big estimates in terms of the market size. And we are expecting the management piece of that to be 8% of the TAM. And this shows why 5G. Why is 5G an essential network or the ideal network to connect end devices to edge computing applications? So I'll be quick on this slide. What this is showing is a bunch of end applications and devices, and the reason why they need 5G. And there are multiple reasons for each one, but I've highlighted only one to just make the slide simple. So for example, drone need mobility, AMRs or autonomous vehicles need latency, IoT needs support for a large number of IoT devices, robots reliability, cameras bandwidth, AR goggles low power, and the network needs to support something called network slicing so that you can collapse all of these workloads onto one network and you can slice up the network to support all of them. So that's why 5G is a must. And then you have edge computing applications that span all the way from far edge, which could be, say, a gateway or a router that's connecting from, say, USB or Ethernet to 5G, to an on-prem enterprise edge, which is a set of servers, to a cloud edge, which could be on a data center such as Equinix, all the way going to the public cloud. So you have all these Kubernetes clusters, and I say edge, but it's really edge to cloud. And then you have applications that go all the way from edge to cloud. They can be network services, 5G RAN, 5G core, security, SD-WAN, or they can be edge computing applications, drone control, AR, VR, video analytics, so on and so forth. And you see the management complexity. You need somebody to manage all these applications across all these edge sites and elements of the infrastructure that the DevOps team needs configured alongside these applications. And that's really where we come in. Just to highlight that point a little bit more, what is the specific problem that Aarna Networks is solving? The specific problem is that the stress on application management explodes with 5G and edge computing. And our assessment is 100,000-fold. And you might say, why does it go up so much? The reason is in 5G, everything is software. Other than the radio, the RAN, the core, the firewall, the security appliances, the SD-WAN, everything is software. And you have a whole host of edge computing applications. And the number of instances only go up with network slicing. You have tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of edge sites. And as we all know, the edge is super dynamic. You're not going to park applications and come back in 18 months. They'll be spinning up, spinning down, slicing, reconfiguration, upgrades, migration, replication. So the complexity really goes up, and existing mechanisms don't work. And we have slides on that, but for now, take my word for it. And that's the solution we are building, the Aarna Networks multi-cluster orchestration platform. It does orchestration, lifecycle management, automated service assurance through something called closed loop automation. And then we have some proprietary 5G value add in terms of network slicing management, analytic services such as non-real-time radio intelligent controller, network data analytics functions, NWDAF, etc. And our customers agree that the problem exists and this is a good solution. We have a number of POCs going on, and we expect the first ones to go into production in Q1 and Q2 timeframe next year. We have 3 engagements in ORAN to manage the ORAN. The component specifically is called SMO, Service Management and Orchestration. We have an edge and / cloud orchestration engagement, 5G core management, several engagements, PNF, where we can manage the radio and other physical devices, and a network slicing management engagement. In terms of the company, there are 2 co-founders. We are second-time entrepreneurs. Our previous company was a 10 gig Ethernet SmartNIC company, which was sold to Emulex. Emulex ultimately got sold to Broadcom. So there was we were successfully able to get Emulex from not being in Ethernet at all to becoming #1 in Ethernet. And then a variety of companies since then, leadership roles, me on more of the product management side and Sriram on the engineering side. And we are in the middle of closing our seed round, and we plan to raise an A round end of 2022 or early 2023. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Amar. I appreciate it, my friend. So with that, thank you all for spending time with us and going through what you've worked on. Before I hand it over to Kevin, I just want to reemphasize that what you had seen is really a collection of 4 teams that are building technologies enabled by cloud computing and connectivity, all of which have heavy dependencies on data. And that was really the theme and the goal of what we've built here in the 5G Open Innovation Lab. So with that, Kevin, I'd like to turn it over to yourself to talk a little bit more about the fund.
Sure. Thank you, Jim. And thank you all the teams, Amar, Anand, Kevin, and Chris. Great opportunities and fun to be involved with all of you via the lab. So what Jim has articulated, and then the companies did a little bit more emphasis on, is this is a huge opportunity in terms of what's available, and we've done a good job on the lab side of attracting high quality partners to come in and help us do this. The things Intel, T-Mobile, Accenture, you can see them all here. They're all listed. These are all partners and sponsors of our lab, which is great because they are super helpful, as Anand talked about in particular. In his case, T-Mobile was very helpful to him. Other companies could talk about other opportunities and other things that were helpful from these partners in the lab. So we've got a great group of companies that help sponsor our lab, which allows us to have a free program, by the way, which is one of the things that's unique about our lab program, is that for the startups, it's pretty easy to join once you're invited because it's a free program. Go ahead to the next one, Josh. That's one leg of our stool that makes what we're doing on our fund side and what we hope to take advantage of from our lab with our fund is the corporate sponsors on the top right corner, Microsoft and all those folks. They help pay for the lab, but more importantly, they provide help to the companies and engage with the companies to be able to do the kinds of things that these companies want to accomplish, whether it's go-to-market issues, whether it's co-selling, whether it's technical issues. These companies in the right top corner are all available for our startups to be able to engage with when they come into and are invited into the lab. Obviously, on the left side, we have a number of companies that listed that are parts of our lab. That's another leg of the school. Those are our two main customers for the lab, are providing for those two folks to engage with each other. In the bottom left corner, we also have in our ecosystem a large number of venture funds who have joined the program in terms of providing companies both for deal flow perspective and also looking at companies for potential investments. We've got about 95 and growing venture firms that have provided companies into the program. About 50% of our, the last time I looked, which was a bit ago, about 50% of our deal flow is coming from other venture firms, which allows us to get super high quality deal flow for our lab. In the right bottom corner, we have enterprise ecosystem. We're starting to bring in the customer perspective a bit more into the ecosystem. Companies like CNH and PG&E, Portland Gas and Electric, are trying to figure out how they're going to utilize all of these cool technologies that are enabled by 5G networks and edge compute. They also provide our startups with the customer perspective about how they're thinking about this and joining into the program and learning how they might use 5G, who they might partner with. They can talk to our corporate sponsors and corporate partners as well and learn a lot of things about what's going on in this ecosystem. And in the middle of all that sits the 5G Open Innovation Lab, where we enable all these connections between all these various different constituencies, but it builds a really powerful ecosystem that we think we can leverage pretty strongly with our fund. Josh, next slide. My experience, my background is I've been in this business of venture capital for a long time. I started with Vulcan Ventures, which is the large family office of the late Paul Allen. When I was working for him, he was the second richest man in the world. And we had great deal flow out of that experience. And we built some really great companies while I was involved with my time with Paul. Then went on to start a small venture fund here in Seattle called Divergent Ventures. And then subsequently have joined the lab. My experience is you really need three things to be really successful in venture investing. First and foremost, you need great deal flow. In our case, we've got really, really good deal flow. Like I said, we get deal flow from our partners. We get deal flow from our other venture firms that are in our ecosystem. We get referrals because our program appears to be pretty successful. And I think most of the CEOs who are involved in the call today would attest that it's been value added for them. They're happy to refer other folks that they know who are starting interesting companies. And so we have a lot of deal flow coming in from all over the place. We then curate that deal flow in conjunction with our partners. So we've got lots of signal coming in from many different pieces of the ecosystem about which companies they think are interesting. Once we invite those companies in, we invite about 15 companies twice a year. So we look at about 30 companies in the lab each year. Again, that's been curated down from many more companies than that via our partners and ourselves. We then bring companies into the program. We have a 12-week program for the startup companies to be able to learn and engage with our partners, et cetera. But most importantly for us on the fund side, it gives us the opportunity to spend 12 weeks with these teams and really, really get to know the teams. We get into levels of detail that if you were an outside investor who was just looking at a round, you might not be able to get nearly as much over as long a period of time understanding of how well the teams are executing, how much signal, are the relationships with the partners getting stronger over the 12-week period of time? Are they not engaging with the partners very well? Is the partner engagement getting less interesting? Those kinds of things, which are all helpful to us in selecting the subset of the companies in the portfolio for the lab that we might make investments for out of our rolling fund. And the third ingredient that we get that's pretty unique for the fund is a knowledge base. We have a knowledge base that we develop. All of our partners, whether they're the corporate partners or the funds, or the startups or the other parts of the ecosystem, they're all providing knowledge about how all this stuff is going to work. As you can tell from the presentations from the startups, these issues are very, very complex. To make all of these things work is extremely difficult, and it needs to be a group of people who make all this happen. And so we've brought that ecosystem together, and we also have a knowledge base. Earlier than most other folks. One of the ways you make money in venture capital is having better knowledge earlier than others in the ecosystem and others in the marketplace, of which we think will have a tremendous amount of that. So that circle is a pretty powerful circle for us to be able to, we think, make exceptionally good choices about what companies we bring into our portfolio on the fund side. This is a slide about all of the companies that have come into the lab. As Jim articulated, I believe at the beginning, we've had 59 companies come through the program. Collectively, they've raised about $522 million, $500 million, even prior to coming into our program. There are several later stage companies that have brought in substantial amounts of money. Subsequent to that, the companies have also brought in another $185 million, and that number goes up. It seems like every day. We've had 3 or 4 announcements in the last couple of weeks in terms of companies that have closed additional rounds of financing. Things that we find are pretty interesting across this is we've had companies, as you can see, we've got a good distribution across pre-seed, seed, Series A, and Series B. Our focus for the fund, the rolling fund, will be pre-seed, seed, and Series A companies and rounds. Occasionally we might do a Series B, but it's unlikely that we would do a large number of those companies. The other thing that's pretty interesting about this is the breadth of kinds of applications that are on here. They're all the way from companies that identify fire suppression technologies to the 3 or 4 that you heard from today. Which are just a sampling of the cool and interesting companies that we have. The other thing that's pretty interesting is that we've been able to go international. We've had 3 companies from Israel, a couple companies from the UK, 1 from Berlin, a number of companies from different parts of Canada. So we've had a lot of selection to choose from for the lab, and then also for the fund as a subset of the lab. Next one. This is our 4th batch, which is a pretty interesting set of companies. Again, they run all the way from Series C through Series B. Actually, Series C in this case. Judd was actually, I believe, a Series C company. They've raised $80 million plus. So we really do run the gamut from very early stage companies through later stage companies. So it's a great set of companies, and then this, I think the quality of each batch gets a little bit better, which is also fantastic for us, is that the deal flow continues to get better and better and better as we move through. You heard from Metrolla today as an example of this particular batch. Next one. Some of the activity that's happened, and it's interesting and fun things that have happened to companies that have come through our labs. You can see in the top left corner, Mixcom is our first exit of companies that have been in the lab. It was acquired by another semiconductor company out of Europe. It's a $135 million exit, which is a great exit for a company that had only raised 1 round of capital. A bunch of other companies have raised significant B rounds since they've come through the lab, and some Series A rounds as well. So again, this is part of the $185 million that companies have subsequently come through. And again, they run the gamut from $2.7 million seed round for Omnivore to some later stage $38 million raised Series B round raised for Proximy, and 37 for Blue White Robotics. So again, a good breadth and depth of kinds of activity that are happening around our lab, which makes great pickings for us to be able to select our portfolio for the rolling fund. As Jim articulated, Jim and I are the partners on the fund, although we're supported by a large staff of folks, both at the lab and other places in the parts of the ecosystem. We have input from a number of different places. We have signal coming from a bunch of different people about which companies are executing the strongest. So far, our experience is that all of our companies are executing well. And the question is, which ones of the companies we think best fit with our vision of things that are interesting to invest in, and which companies we think are the best, most likely to have the greatest returns for our fund. As I said, quickly, my background is I started with Vulcan Ventures. I was an operator down in Silicon Valley early in my career, then moved up here to Seattle and then went to work for Paul Allen's family office, Vulcan Capital. Did a bunch of deals for Paul. You can see more detail there. We'll send this deck out to all of you after this is over so you can look in more detail. Jim is an operator by trade and has, Jim was the visionary behind bringing our lab together. It was his vision to look out and say that, hey, 5G is going to enable Edge, and Edge is going to enable a new development platform, and there's an opportunity to build a set of to attract a set of developers and companies that are going to build on top of that next generation platform. So we're super excited to be partnering up with Jim on the fund that we're putting together. Next, please. There are a couple of comments in the deck. You can see Mixcom and Simetric have nice things to say. You heard from Kevin. You can read for yourselves when you get this deck later on what some of the comments are. But so these are really just examples of the feedback we're getting from our founders is this is a great program for them, and they're really excited to have been part of it, and happy to refer others to the program, which helps for our deal flow for what we're putting together. So we think all of our constituencies, whether they're our startups or our corporate sponsors or our other venture firms in the ecosystem, everyone seems pretty happy with what we've pulled together, because it's a very unique in the marketplace and gives us a great leverage in terms of making great investments for our fund. Next slide, please. In terms of unifying themes for our fund, you can see on the left side the kinds of things. I think we've talked ad nauseum about what we're focused on. Again, we're doing pre-seed through Series A, primarily North American. We'll do 2+ deals per quarter, so somewhere around 8 to 10 deals a year across the rolling funds. And we'll invest anywhere from a initial $50K in a pre-seed type of deal to upwards of $1 million in a later stage opportunity as the fund comes together and gets pulled together. The fund structure, in this case, we're doing what's called a rolling fund on the AngelList platform, which is a little bit unique relative to a standard traditional venture fund. The most unique aspects of it is it's a perpetual series of quarterly funds. So each quarter we have a fund in the market that exists for one quarter in terms of investments into the fund, and then you subscribe to quarters, the number of quarters you'd like to participate. Our minimum is 4 quarters of $12,500. So you have to subscribe for $50K initially, but then our belief is and our hope is that once you see the kinds of opportunities that are being brought forward and you're being invested in via your fund, your 4 quarters of investing, you'll start to be excited and want to invest further and just continue on. So each quarterly fund, you'll get an opportunity via AngelList. We'll send you an email that says, hey, would you like to subscribe to your next quarter fund? You can then at that point say, nope, I don't like what these folks are doing. I'm going to stop. Or, we're quite confident that you're going to say, hey, this is really cool stuff. I want to continue to fund this. And then you'll put in, another $12,500. Or you can, even if you're really excited, you could even up your commitment to a higher number than the 25,000, or excuse me, the 12,500. You could go to 25 or 50 or 100, and then you just continue to subscribe for as long as you have capital available, and as long as you're happy with what we're doing. We're a standard 2% management fee fund, as well as a 20% GP carry, which are standard terms for venture capital funds. I think that's probably it. And as we said, Halo Car is pretty cool, and they're going to be rolling out their service soon. You heard more about Halo Car earlier, so we're pretty excited about that. At this point, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to pipe in via chat, and we'd be happy to answer any of them.
Thank you, Kevin. There was a question around the access to the deck, and I just responded to let everyone know that we'll be sharing it later today.
Yeah, as I said, we'll share both a link to this video as well as the deck that we're going through for folks to be able to look at. And then feel free to reach out to myself. We'll provide you with information on how to connect with me. If you want to have more detailed questions or more personal discussions, I'm happy to talk to anyone who wants to talk about the fund. We're really excited about the platform that we've put together. And we believe it's super unique. There really isn't anything else out there in the market that's like it. There are other Y Combinators and some others, but they're not free to the entrepreneurs. They're not they're not cross company size. They're all focused mostly on very, very early stage companies. And so we've got some pretty unique aspects to our platform. Any other questions come in?
No, just a few thank yous. So I guess we'll end on a thank you as well. Again, to Anand and Amar, Chris and Kevin, thank you all for joining us today. If you were to think about the takeaways of today's call, on my end, the big takeaway I hope you all walk away from is that, while there is a lot of noise about 5G and edge, we're really working at that intersection of industries and platforms and innovation, and we get to see that by our program. None of the startups you met with today came to a program to be accelerated. These are all very seasoned and accomplished founders and engineers. These are folks that really wanted to break through some of the barriers of what it means to connect with some of the great partners that we have and to work alongside other founders who are pursuing this opportunity that are going to exist on the edge. So we don't operate an incubator or an accelerator program. We really operate an ecosystem program. And for that, I hope one of the takeaways is that you see that there is a huge opportunity from an investment standpoint. And as you're seeing a lot of these signals coming through, you can ground that into the world of data and how that's going to play out on the edge and how connectivity will play a vital role in all that and how all kind of comes together. And now see examples of teams that are building capabilities on top of those platforms. And so with that, really appreciate everyone's time today. I know it's a busy part of the year, so thank you for spending some time with us. Kevin, thank you for taking us through the slides. And again, to all of our founders, thank you for spending time with us today. And then Josh for coordinating everything and producing the show. Thank you all for your time. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers. Thank you.